Hello, Martin. I'm really grateful that you accepted to be part of this interview. I'm just introducing myself. I should introduce you. I'm Feliciea Jibson. I'm the Managing Director at FERSA Limited, and I have the honor today to have a professional discussion with Martin Bloomfield from Dyslexia Bites. How are you, Martin?
Nice for you to invite me. Thanks very much. I'm really honored.
Martin, you know, we conduct different interviews and then we try every time to be a little bit original, but everybody would like to know about you.
I doubt that. Well, you said I run the Dyslexia Bites project, and the Dyslexia Bites project, it comes from a lot of my experiences. So it comes from my experiences with training and consultancy, but also with dyslexia, and I work internationally, interculturally. And what's really obvious is that there is no intercultural perspective on dyslexia. Dyslexia seems to be owned by the International Dyslexia Association, the British Dyslexia Association, the Dyslexia Institute. Sometimes you'll get input from the European Dyslexia Association, but in general, it's these 3 or 4 organizations who seem to do all the research and all the dissemination of the research about dyslexia. This often isn't appropriate for Asian, East Asian, African, South American cultures. And so I try to collect voices of dyslexia from around the world and try to help people understand dyslexia in their own cultural contexts. Personally, I discovered I was dyslexic when I was 30, handing in my master's degree. And I felt a great deal of shame. A lot of people do when they discover they're dyslexic. And I'm one of the people. I felt a great deal of shame. But now I look back on my life and it explains everything. It's really funny.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's really enlightening what you're telling us. And obviously I've got other questions if possible, no? And one of them is, what does dyslexia mean to you?
Yeah, and this is a great question, because the question is, what does it mean to you? And this is one of the things. Dyslexia is not a one-size-fits-all condition or whatever you want to call it. It's always personal. There's no single thing that we call dyslexia. So if somebody says dyslexia is this and you don't quite recognize that, that doesn't mean you're not dyslexic. It just means that maybe their description of dyslexia doesn't include what you're going through. For me, there's a lot of things that intersect. So there's things like working memory, sequencing, and executive function. These are the 3 ways it really affects me. I mean, I've got a slow reading speed and my handwriting is all over the place. I'll put letters in words that shouldn't be there. Letters will look strange. I'll put strange shapes onto letters when I don't mean to. But the chief way it affects me is executive function, which is ordering, prioritizing, and sorting out information. Effectively, most people have a secretary and a personal assistant living inside them, and I don't. And that's what it means to have executive function issues. Sequencing, I get sequences wrong. I get left, right, wrong all the time. Sometimes I'll spell words backwards. I see words backwards, interestingly. I can read I'll read a word, and it's only afterwards that I realize I'm looking in a mirror and the word's in the background. And so I'll sequence poorly like that as well. And I find counting difficult, believe it or not. So part of my job is I take people out in the evening. So I'll run dyslexia awareness courses, and the people on these courses come from all over the European Union. So I'll take them out in the evening, and maybe we've booked a table at a restaurant and there are 13 of us, and I'll have to count the chairs. And after 5 or 6, I'll lose count and I've got to start again. Okay, 1, 2, 4, 5, 1, 2, and once I've got that, then I turn to the number of people. I go, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'll lose count of the people, and then I've forgotten how many chairs there are. And so this is one of the ways that sequencing affects me. It also, however, dyslexia also affects me very, very well indeed. I do have a very creative streak. I think very, very visually, and I make connections between ideas that perhaps other people wouldn't make connections between. And those around me know me as being a rather eccentric thinker, but one who can come up with solutions to problems and who can see round difficulties in ways that others can't.
This is absolutely fascinating and reminds me of Professor Emeritus Angela Fawcett. She was our guest. It was a conference in Brussels, and then the way how she portrayed the dyslexia, it was absolutely fascinating. And what you tell us as a person who actually says that dyslexia has a very creating mind and has lots of strengths, and we have to use those. And then it's not a stigma.
No, absolutely. And in fact, one of the big things is realizing that we call it dyslexia. We begin the word with the prefix dys, which automatically makes people think of it as a negative thing, because dys is an inability, you can't do it. And actually, there's so many abilities associated with dyslexia, and the scientific, psychological, and empirical research proves this. But we just don't think of it in those terms. And that's one of the reasons it's so stigmatized in general society.
Martin, I have another question for you. Is obviously from your experience and stand for what you already go through when you went to the school, how do we support dyslexic learners?
Yeah, it's actually, it's not always easy, but one of the things we do, and when I made this infographic, I could have done it in almost any order. So it's not a linear infographic. It's not that you start here and end there. One of the things we need to do is listen. Just listen to what people are going to do. Really just listen to them. And then watch what they do. Not only their actions, but their reactions. So when we give children tasks, for instance, can you read this book? And watch how they react. Do they recoil? Do they put it down and then use avoidance strategies? That sort of thing. And if we watch how they act, watch how they react to certain things we want them to do, listen to what they say about it, then we can try to empathize. And empathy is about trying to put ourselves in their shoes, trying to say to ourselves, well, okay, what was it like when I was a child and I was asked to do something I couldn't do? How did it feel for me? Did I feel shamed? Did I feel angry? Did I feel like I was being somehow punished for doing something which I found really difficult? Well, I wanted to do this, but that wasn't appropriate. And maybe that if we can empathize with the child, we can accept what they're talking about. A lot of the time, if a child says something like, oh, I can't read, or I can't read this, or I don't know what this means, one of the natural reactions is to say, of course you can read, rather than listen to them by that. And then remembering that often, if it's a child, the child might not be able to articulate precisely she or he means. If they say they can't read, we just have to accept that at face value, because a lot of the time, it's difficult for a young child to properly articulate quite what they have in mind, quite what they mean. And this is one of the reasons that when people say dyslexia involves words moving around on a page, it doesn't. That's something very different. But sometimes it doesn't matter. We can't argue with them. We've just got to listen to them and go, okay, right. So what you mean is reading isn't a pleasant thing for you. And once we accept what they mean and we empathize, the job is to love. And this is the first thing. And I know I sound like a hippie when I say this, but I mean this absolutely. There's a woman I'm talking to at the moment, a mother in Australia, and her child is being kept inside at school over breaks and lunch times because her child isn't doing the work on time. And it's almost like it's a punishment. They're causing this child to miss playtime, to miss time outside with his friends, to miss fresh air, to miss socializing time, to sit indoors and have to go over this work that clearly is psychologically traumatizing him. Clearly it is. And there's no empathy and no love for the child in that. There seems to be a love for the task that the child has to do, rather than an understanding of what the child's going through. So finally, I'd suggest we actually ask ourselves, what is dyslexia? What is it about this child's dyslexia? What does this child want to do, and why does this child want to do it? So we begin a voyage of discovery. And the next thing, if we have a look at the next slide, I talk very, very much about core beliefs. Now, I am a great proponent of the idea that okay, not everything you think leads to an action. So if I have if there's a particular politician in America, for instance, or in Venezuela or whoever that I don't like, I'm not going to go over there and clock them over the head with a hammer. I'm not going to do that. Of course I'm not. And yet I do believe that our core beliefs manifest themselves in the way we act. Now, if our core beliefs manifest themselves in the way we act, those actions model behaviors for other people as well. And those behaviors create new core beliefs, because beliefs create behaviors and behaviors create beliefs. It's a sort of a hermeneutic circle. And then it goes on and on and on. So what we need to do is we need to examine our own core beliefs. Here's a very good example of what I mean when I say that. I run many dyslexia awareness workshops. And one of the things I do when I begin them is by asking, let's say they're teachers or business people, I ask them what they associate dyslexia with. And they write down a lot of things that they associate dyslexia with. And then afterwards, we look at them and ask, are these positive or are these negative? And almost always they involve, oh, dyslexic people can't, or dyslexic people have trouble with, or dyslexic people are slow at. And these are all really negative statements. And so our core beliefs about dyslexia tend to be quite negative. So we need to examine that and ask ourselves instead, well, okay, that's one way of framing it. Is there a better way of framing it? A way of framing it that perhaps doesn't stigmatize the person with dyslexia.
Martin, what you're saying is actually in accordance to our beliefs. As you know, that we develop a PAGS platform, and PAGS is actually profile assessment and goal setting and online profiling and progress monitoring tool. This was not planned to be said, but I'm just saying it. One of our parents that she worked with us, she was saying to me, this is the first assessment that actually is telling what my daughter can do and not what my daughter cannot do. And what you just said, to reframe the way how we think and to look at the strengths, is so important, because we can say what the child cannot do looking at the strengths CDQ questionnaire, but actually what about if we play and start building on their strengths? And talking about this, I know, like for instance, one of the questions will be, how can we as individuals show solidarity with parents of dyslexic children? I know you're very passionate about it. So
I'm very, very passionate. Every single parent I talk to is somebody who is an inspiration to me. And one of the things I've done here is I've shown 3 people. Now, it doesn't have to be 3, but what is important is it's more than 2. It's more than a speaker and a listener. So clearly what we need to do is we need to listen to them. We need to listen with open ears and try to empathize. We need to try to see it from their side. But often we have limiting beliefs. We have preconceptions. We have norms which we operate under. And we have what some people may call cognitive biases. Now, it's almost impossible, if not actually impossible, for us to see our own cognitive biases and our own preconceptions. So what we need is we need a sort of feedback loop, and that involves bringing other people in. It involves having a conversation that involves more than simply the parents and ourselves, the parents, ourselves, and other people, to sort of give an outside view of what's going on and how we are reacting to what they're saying. And so what this involves, it involves a sort of, again, this hermeneutic idea that we can explore our own preconceptions by listening to other people and by having other people give us feedback. And I don't mean that in a formal sense, but, you know, over a cup of coffee in a cafe, you know, we can all give each other feedback and go, I like what you did there, but I think you might have misunderstood what she was saying, something along those lines. And so if we open up the conversation to as many people as possible, then this opportunity for feedback becomes greater and greater and greater. And the opportunity for the people that we're able to listen to becomes greater. And so what we need to do is we need to open up the conversation between the parents and ourselves to as many people as possible. And that means that the conversation is contextualized, and it means that our reactions become, as it were, observed. Not in a formal sense, not in a negative way, but in a way that helps us to understand ourselves and how we're reacting to people.
This is fabulous. And Martin, we have invited you to one of our parents group. So we have an inclusion for parents group that we just opened. And I am really honored that we have you as a guest, and we are looking forward to hearing other the guidance that you offer to our parents. So thank you ever so much. And the way how you portray the solidarity and then listening to the feedback is ever so important. So Martin, and on the lines that we just discussed up to now is how do you think that how PACS, our platform, online profiling, progress monitoring tool, can help and support the dyslexic learners?
Well, the PAGS does something quite unique, which is it takes a whole person view. It doesn't simply say, okay, we're going to look at your dyslexia. That would be an inappropriate thing because you can't separate somebody's dyslexia from themselves. And so you need to take a holistic view of the person, and that's what PAGS does. And that's one of the reasons which I think it's a very, very useful tool indeed, and it's quite unique. Most tools don't actually do that. They look specifically for dyslexia. And in looking for dyslexia, they've already defined dyslexia in their preconceptions. And actually, that might be an inappropriate thing to do. So if you just look at the whole person and look at what the person's good at, what the person's not so good at, because this is something we have to balance. We can't lie to ourselves and pretend that people are just talented. You know, people have got talents and people have got maybe areas where they struggle. And so if we find this in a holistic whole person way, then we're actually dealing with that person's life, that person's needs, rather than simply the life and needs that correspond to our own preconceived aims and purposes.
Martin, thank you ever so much. This is an absolutely super feedback, and I would like the audience to know that we did not prepare this. This is just coming. You know, we did look at the questions, but we did not prepare the answers. Thank you again, and thank you for pointing out that PACS will actually empower the parents and will provide practical solution. And I love the way how you said it, that you cannot separate dyslexia, you cannot put it out. You just have to have a holistic overview of what the child, the adult can do. So now I am really, you know, I would like so much to continue this discussion, and I'm sure that if I book in advance, I may get another appointment with you to record another session. And by all means, this is our website, pacsprofile.com. And Martin, you should have here your website as well, which is Dyslexia Bites.
Dyslexiabites.org, yes, B-Y-T-E-S, so dyslexiabites.org. Please take a look at it. And if you want, you can also see me on YouTube. And that's simply www.youtube.com/one word, Dyslexia Bites, D-Y-S-L-E-X-I-A-B-Y-T-E-S, I believe. So, now that was a struggle.
Martin Bloomfield, thank you ever so much for your time, and thank you for being part of this interview, and I'm looking forward to a continuation of this. So thank you.